Amen. Okay. All right, we left off on verse 27. We got through 27, and just as a real quick recap, we're talking about Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. We know that he got a message that Lazarus was sick. Um, Mary and Martha had sent for Jesus, and when he got the news, he purposely delayed for a couple of days, which seemed to be strange in a lot of ways. But when you think of the Jewish belief or the Jewish teaching that when a body dies, that the spirit of the soul kind of hovers around that body for up to 3 days until the body changes, or meaning decomposition starts to take place. And whatever the reason Jesus had, it was a good one. And he wanted to um, uh, wait, and that was his choice. And anyway, when he told the disciples that he was wanting to go to Judea, they asked him, Rabbi, lately the Jews sought to stone you. This is in verse 8. And you want to go there again? And Jesus responded to them accordingly. One of the things that came up in verse 15, I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, that you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go to him. Possibility, maybe, if Jesus had been there, that may have been persuaded to heal Lazarus rather than raise him from the dead. And the whole purpose was to bring, as we see in verse 4, when Jesus heard that, he said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it. We see that when Jesus did get there, that Martha said in verse 21 to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And he went on to say, but even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. She shows faith here. She has faith. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Of course, she thought, meaning in the resurrection. She did not, I don't think, had any inkling that Jesus was going to raise him very shortly. Any questions at that point for a real quick review that we did? Okay, let's begin in verses 28 through 32. It says, and when she had said these things, and this is going back to verse 27, she said to him, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who has come into the world. And when she had said these things, she went her way and secretly called Mary, her sister, saying, the teacher has come and is calling for you. As soon as she heard that, she arose quickly and came to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the town, but was in the place where Martha had met him. Then the Jews who were with her in the house, comforting her, when they saw that Mary rose up quickly and went out, they followed her, saying, she is going to the tomb to weep. And then verse 32, then when Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, again she fell down at his feet, saying to him, this may sound familiar to you, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. That's the same thing, of course, that Martha said in verse 21. And so Mary had, when Martha had went and told Mary that the teacher had come and wanted to talk to her, she got up quickly, as would be natural to do. But she was followed by the mourners. Do you think the mourners knew that Jesus was there? I don't think so. Secretly, yeah, I don't think so. But they got up to follow her because they thought that she was going to go to the tomb to weep and pray and cry mourn more. Notice what Mary did when she saw Jesus in verse 32. She fell down at his feet again in paying honor and glory to him, and then said the same thing that Martha had said in verse 21. Now notice or look at Jesus' reaction in verse 33. Therefore, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her weeping, he was groaned in the spirit and was troubled. What does that mean, he was groaned in the spirit? Yours might say he was deeply moved in the spirit and troubled. Okay, why do you think he acted that way? Yeah. When you see that, and this is one of the questions we have on our discussion questions at the end of the lesson tonight. When you see that groaned in the spirit, what does that often refer to? Jesus being angry, right? And so, but this is not the case here. Well, he might have been angry because sin had caused death in this world, right? All the way back to Adam. He was upset seeing his very close, very loving friends upset. Um, and I think that that's what that means here. Anybody else have a thought or comment maybe on that? Okay. Okay. Indignation. Hmm. Anybody have a comment on that? Deeply moved. Right. 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 Okay. A little bit. I mean, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I think that that's a natural, uh, thing that would be said because she really thought when she sent for him that he would get here sooner. Both of them, both Martha and Mary thought that. Uh, anyway, let's move on. He said then in verse 34, he asked the question, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Um, why do you think he asked where they laid him? I mean, he knew, didn't he? Yeah, I think it was for the benefit of those who had followed Martha and Mary, the Jews. I think it was for that benefit. Of course, then again, one of the most famous memorized verses in the Bible, verse 35, is said, Jesus wept. Now, I asked you on Sunday to think about a little bit. Why do you think he wept? His friend Lazarus, okay, they were very close. They loved each other. Even the Jews said, "Look, he weeps. He loved him." But yes, yes. But don't you think that Jesus knew that here in a matter of moments he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead? I'm sorry. It could be, maybe. Uh, was it because Mary and Martha were crying? I think that's a possibility. Remember in Hebrews 4 and 15, the Hebrew writer says, get over there in just a second. I don't want to paraphrase it. For we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weakness, but was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin. So he had sympathy, I think, for Mary and Martha. Cold, okay? Yeah. Yeah. The weeping of Jesus really is it's another mystery. Was it? I'm going to read here what I wrote down here. Was it merely the sympathetic reaction to the grief and sorrow of the loved ones, possibly, or was there some deeper reason for it? And here's what I think is a big part of it. Our Lord was about to call back to our world of temptation and sin a valiant soldier who had already won the crown of life. Think about it. You die and you go to heaven. Do you want to come back? Uh-uh. I don't want to. I don't want to. Um, and in doing such a thing, there's an undeniable danger to the soul of Lazarus. The prospect of Lazarus again facing life with its inevitable dangers to the soul, and particularly with the additional burden that was being imposed by his resurrection. Remember, the Pharisees were going to kill him. All such considerations are of such profound weight that they may be rightly viewed as plunging the Son of God into the tears as he thought of them. Mark. Right. Oh yeah. Yeah. That's the same thing. Lazarus would have to experience the pain of death again. Oh man, I can see why Jesus might cry about that. Other thoughts or comments on it? Yeah. Yeah. I know. Wayne? No. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. No. I got a list this long. I mean, but I mean, the question does, why do you think he wept? I mean, he knew he was going to raise him here just momentarily, Jeanette, and then right. Yeah. Meanings. Yeah. Yeah. I think we're all could be right. I mean, and there may be more that we don't know. There was a question right here or comment. Yeah, could have been on it. Yeah, right twice. Very emotional. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Get to you in a minute, Cindy. Yeah. No, like I said, I'm not saying that any one particular reason that Jesus wept is the only reason. There's so many, and there's probably ones we don't even know about. Um, so yeah, Mark. Right. God's in control. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Yes. Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. Sure. Yeah. We need to honor the wishes, especially if they're right down. Could be. Never know. Absolutely, they are. They are. Any further thoughts on this? And we'll move on to verse 37. Look what 37 says. Well, I'll go back to 36. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him." Okay, that was one of the reasons they thought he wept. And some of them said, "Could not this man who opened the eyes of the blind also have kept this man from dying?" Um, yes, he could have. I mean, very simply, yeah, yeah, he could. But again, Jesus had a, a yeah, yeah. And then and we read in 38, then Jesus again groaning in himself came to the tomb. It was a cave and a stone lay against it. Uh, again, why was Jesus groaning again? Why was he maybe a little angry? Well, I think he was undoubtedly agitated, partly due to the unbelief that was just expressed in verse 37. You know, sure he could have. I don't know. Yes. We'll have to ask him when we get there. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But then in verse 39, Jesus says, "Take away the stone." Now, Martha was astonished by this request because why? No doubt it's not going to be a pleasant smell. Um, John's description leaves no doubt about the reality of death of Lazarus. He, again, Martha said, "This Lord, by this time there is a stench, for he has been dead 4 days." 4 days. See, the ever so practical Martha had no thought that Jesus was going to bring him back to life. What did Martha say? "Lord," again, "by this time there's a stench." The Jews, unlike the Egyptians, they did not practice embalming in the first century. Okay? Notice what Jesus said to her to comfort her. Look at verse 40. Jesus said, "Did I not say," meaning he's repeating himself, "did I not say to you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God?" These words actually echoed more of what he had said to the disciples back in verse 4. But they were the substance of the assurance he had given Martha in verses 23, 25, and 26. Thoughts or comments? Okay. Verse 41 and 42 are significant for a number of reasons. 41 reads, "Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead man was laying, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, 'Father, I thank you that you have heard me.'" Prior to the miracle, Jesus lifted up his eyes. We see this wording also in John 6 and 5 and John 17 and 1. And he uttered a prayer that was meaningful for several reasons. He addressed God simply as Father rather than our Father. And he did that because of his relationship with God. It was quite different, obviously, than that of others. Secondly, he thanked the Father for having heard him already. This would mean that Jesus already either uttered or mentally prayed to the Father to raise Lazarus. Number three, the everlasting union of the Father and the Son is clear in the words, "I knew that you always hear me," in verse 42. And then he uttered his prayer of thanksgiving aloud. Because why? Why do you think he said it aloud? Who did he want to hear it? Yeah, those mourners, those Jews that came with Mary and Martha, because of the people standing around. The prayer emphasized that Jesus did nothing of himself but was submissive. Took 2 pages at once. That's going to mess me up. And the last one, number 5, he had a great desire for the people to believe he had been sent by the Father and wanted to show the glory of God. Those are, I think, 5 important reasons. Thoughts or comments? Moving on, look at verse 43. Now, when he had said these things, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come forth." Why did he cry out with a loud voice? For the people to hear him. It wasn't because of Lazarus. No. Um, why do you think he called him by name? That's right. Yeah. As authoritative and commanding as Jesus was, if he would have just said, "Come out," everybody would have probably risen. And it wasn't time yet for that. That's funny. It's been a couple of scholars have jokingly, I think, said that. Then look in verse 44. And he who had died came out bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Loose him and let him go." This miracle was instantaneous. Happened as soon as he said it. Um, it was instantaneous. It was complete. It was incontestable as to its reality. There was no doubt. Now, I read some things where people said, well, if he was bound in all the grave cloths, how did he walk out? It doesn't say he walked out. What does it say? Lazarus come forth, and he who had died came out bound. Okay, he could have, who knows, hopped, whatever he had to, floated out. We don't know, but he came out. He came out. So, what was the effect of the miracle on the Jews? Look at verses 45 and 46. Then many of the Jews who had come up to Mary and seen the things Jesus did, they believed in him. But some of them went away to the Pharisees and told them the things that Jesus did. This is when the serious, more organized plot to kill Jesus begins. Yeah, right here. Yes, Mark. Well, we're going to see here as we continue on that this was done entirely for greed and personal, happiness, if you will, on the part of the Sadducees and the Pharisees. Yeah. No, they can't. Oh, I understand. But we see that a special session of the Sanhedrin or the council was convened. Look at verse 47. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered a council and said, "What shall we do?" They admit it here, for this man works many signs. They saw it. They saw it. It is interesting that Jesus said not long before this, turn back to Luke 16:31. This is in talking in the class we had just recently about the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, different Lazarus again. Look at verse 31 in chapter 16. But he said to him, "If they do not hear Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded, though one rise from the dead." He predicted that. He predicted it. That's amazing to me. Yes, with this regard, yes. No. That's right. It's amazing to me that they could not accept it. But that's not what they expected to come back. Wayne, greed, right? And that we're going to see that as we, yeah, Mark. Well, but notice in the Bible it doesn't say anything about what Lazarus did afterwards or anything. Eh, yeah, and raised again. I'd have a lot of questions for him, I guess. Yeah. But with regard to this meeting of Sanhedrin, there was no doubt that this was an unofficial gathering rather than an actual council session. The reference to Caiaphas, I may be pronouncing that wrong, as one of them in verse 49, and one of them, Caiaphas, being high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all." Okay. Um, for this to have been a formal assembly of the Sanhedrin, it must have been called by uh, Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year. Now, when it says that year, it doesn't mean he was just for 1 year. Actually, he was high priest for 18 years. I think the time limit was 18 AD to 36 AD, for about 18 years. The expression here, chief priests and Pharisees, in verse 47, is a comprehensive name for those making up the high court of justice. Now, most of the court was made up of Sadducees, and the rest were Pharisees. And they were actually the minority who basically did the work of scribes. As you know, the Sadducees were diametrically opposed in philosophy and religion to the Pharisees. What was so unique about the Sadducees? Do you remember? They did not believe in the resurrection. Matthew 22 and 23 says that. But because of their hatred for Jesus, the Sadducees were willing to align themselves with the Pharisees to discuss the problem of Jesus. It's amazing what hate will do. Hate. Oh. Any thoughts or comments so far? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. There you go. I like that. I like it. It's interesting. Other questions, thoughts? The concern of the council was not to discover whether or not a miracle had taken place or to learn if Jesus was really who he claimed to be. That wasn't the purpose. They did not deny that Jesus performed miracles. Verse 47 says that. For this man works many signs, including raising the dead. Their concern was for their jobs and their privileged status. Look at 48, verse 48. If we let him alone like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation. That's all they cared about. If Jesus was not stopped, soon the whole country would be in turmoil. Now, this would cause the Romans to put tighter restrictions on the nation, and if that happened, then they could lose their positions of power. It was all about power. Go ahead. By who? But I don't know for sure. Um, they were uh, right. Yeah, took some out of the coffers. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. They saw only one solution to the problem. Jesus had to die. The high priest told the council, look in verse 50. Nor do you consider that it is expedient for us that one man should die for the people and not the whole nation should perish. Jesus' death was not only for the nation, but also for the children of God who are scattered abroad. Look at 52. And not for that nation only, but also that he would gather together in one the children of God who were scattered abroad. Remember in the story of the Good Shepherd we talked about just recently in John 10, Jesus would bring other sheep into the sheepfold, okay, who did not belong to the Jewish sheepfold, into one flock with one shepherd, and that was we talked about the Gentiles. Yeah. Yes. Any other thoughts, questions? Yes. They believe what they saw. Yeah. Yeah. For their political standing, their wealth, their power, their glory, if you will. It's all greed and yeah, amazing, absolutely amazing. I'm sure they did. I'm sure there was plenty of people who came back and told them, if even and but I believe there was probably some of them there, maybe. Well, it doesn't say. It says so from that day on, they planned, huh? Some believed, yeah, yeah, that's true. But from that day on, they planned together to kill Jesus. We see that in 53 and verse 57. Um, for some time, man had a desire to put Jesus to death. We know that. But this was different. Previous attacks had been sporadic. This time, Christ's enemies would not rest until he was dead. Earlier attempts to execute Jesus had been personal and unofficial. Henceforth, the efforts would be under the auspices of council leaders. The most important difference, though, is not readily apparent. Previously, the Pharisees had taken the lead to try to destroy Christ. You see that in Mark 3 and 6. But it was the Sadducees who dominated the Sanhedrin. Sadducees did not believe in the resurrection we talked about and would have been especially disturbed by the report of the raising of Lazarus. They would have been just, woo! From now on, it would be the Sadducees who took the lead in planning Jesus' death. They had the political connections to do what the Pharisees were unable to do. Yes, David. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, what? And not too many decades later, the Rome fell. You know, well, who had? I thought I saw a hand up. Okay, that basically closes. I wanted, and I should have done this in my kind of cap of last Sunday. In verse 16 of chapter 11, we were talking about then Thomas, and this is the famous doubting Thomas, if you were. It says, who is called Didymus. That means the twin. Okay. Uh, I didn't mention that, and I should have probably because someone said something. Patricia heard them saying, "Isn't that you know meaning something?" So the twin. So I just wanted to clarify that. Any final thoughts before we go over the questions real quick? Oh yeah, But- yeah. And when he comes again, that's he's coming with a loud voice to shout. Yeah. I absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. Let's go over the questions real quick. Um, Pretty easy ones here, I think. On the Bible class, discussed the question number one. After Jesus received word from Mary and Martha about Lazarus' illness, how long did he wait before responding? 2 days. How long had Lazarus been dead when Christ arrived in Bethany? 4 days. What was the resurrection of Lazarus been called? The climactic miracle in the ministry of Christ. Um, how are the words deeply moved and troubled often used in the gospel accounts? Used in a negative way to refer to Jesus' anger. Shortest verse, 35, Jesus wept. Did Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead produce faith in everyone? Not everyone, some who were serving as a high priest that year that Jesus died. Caiaphas. How long did he serve? 36 years. It was from AD 18 to AD 36. That year just means at the time Jesus was crucified. That year. Um, Jewish sect that controlled the Sanhedrin, the Sadducees. And why didn't the Sadducees believe? What did they believe concerning the resurrection? They didn't believe in it. And last was what Jewish sect took the lead in planning Jesus' death, and there it was the Sadducees. Any final thoughts or comments? I'm over a couple minutes. Thank you so much. As I mentioned, Jason is going to take over for me